economies in China, where you often held up as a model, you do actually see an awful lot of inhumane treatment, brutality, and many other troubling consequences of its path that, again, go underreported. So what I would hope is, those of you who read the book, and I hope that's most of you, this is a guide to how to view the world in a slightly different way, and it's a way to decode the narrative that we're being given by the West in order to justify its behavior, to justify its economic control, to justify why certain forms of development are desirable or undesirable, and often in a way that suits the interests of Western corporations. I hope that that is what you will take from it, and just to reassess and be more critical and skeptical sometimes of what you are being told by governments of Europe and the United States. I'm going to stop talking about that, but I look forward to hearing what my fellow speakers have to say. It's a pleasure being here.
Thanks, James. Our next speaker is Soma Das, and she's a journalist, Financial Express, a leading economic journal, and of Indian Express Group, and specializes in business and economy, and she's edited pages in Indian Express, Times of India, The Hindu, mainly on issues related to health and gender. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Soma Das.
Actually, was a googly for me. I thought it's going to be something like the Freakonomics series telling me the economics of crime thriller or something like that. I was pleasantly surprised to find myself amidst pages which promised a very well-researched, empirically rich, alternative, radical theory which stood at the cusp of geopolitics and political economy. For instance, there's very interesting logic which has been given to show how seemingly innocuous deals like Huawei's takeover of 3Com didn't go through because of what kind of strategic differences between China and US. So these are gaps, and these are interesting logics to fill in those gaps. Here comes the second confession. I got a copy of the book just 2 hours before this, so I haven't managed to read the whole of it, the first chapter. So most of what I would be talking about now is actually questions the line of thinking rather than the real content of the book. And as a business journalist, I can't resist the temptation of, putting my skeptical antennas off. To begin with, US and China are two extremes of a spectrum. US has too much of information, glut of information, too much of an open economy. China is just the contrast, a closed economy, complete absence of information. Now, the conflict that we all see playing out between the two economies is inevitable, indisputable. However, the origin of this conflict, whether the origin is partly in US, wholly in US, partly in China, wholly in China, is still debatable. Secondly, very interesting reading of the subprime crisis. The book goes on to discuss that subprime crisis was deliberate and by design. In the economic discourse till now, we have not found conclusive evidence to establish that it was not a crisis of slippage, just a production-consumption imbalance. I would, sir, look forward and read deeply to understand whether this book actually offers formidable evidence to back that the subprime crisis was indeed a deliberate attempt on part of US to protect its strategic interests. Thirdly, US's strategic position is in this globe is fortunately or unfortunately still unchallenged. Military expenditure at 700 billion is 7 times more than China's 100 billion and exceeds the military expenditure of 20 next economies combined. The US is still omnipresent. Its maneuvering and presence across the globe, the ethics of which is debatable, the correctness is questionable. But China till now has not shown the inclination to step up its strategic prowess to challenge US's position that way. Finally, I would like to say that it slightly overemphasizes the importance of one sector, that is defense, in the larger economy. Having said that, I could not agree more than the fundamental spirit of the book, which argues for disarmament and demilitarization. That is a message, more than me, I think most of us would agree, and we are looking for ways to further that particular message. And sir, a voice like yours makes our democracy much more vibrant and a world a much more open and livable place. I wish you all the best, and I also wish that this book becomes to the strategic sector what an inconvenient truth became to the climate change. Thank you so much.
Jerry, apologize if I can't say it right, Giannino Almeida. Okay. He is the founder of International Confederation of NGOs, a tireless worker for peace and social justice. And with his team of iCongo, he has started an initiative that salutes and showcases the extraordinary and inspiring work done by ordinary citizens who end up doing extraordinary acts. All of us, of course, have the capacity to do that around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jerry.
Having said that, I won't go into world economics of war and the business of war and the business of killing. I just kind of talk and try to provoke a thought process about India. And where does India stand in this on this entire issue? We all know of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Sorry, Manmohan Singh. And he's been nicknamed that by the media now. But Dr. Manmohan Singh was not Mon at the time when he had to take a stand during the nuclear deal. And Dr. Manmohan Singh came up in full force along with all his other stooges and said that let's call for a trust vote. And the trust vote was pretty much fixed because the nuclear deal had to go through. Most people in the media didn't question the points in the nuclear deal. The left questioned it, the BJP questioned it, but it was later proven by Julian Assange that the left and the BJP were also a part of the coalition which wanted the nuclear deal to go through. Now this is not a conspiracy theory anymore because those papers have been leaked, right? And that's the only time you saw Manmohan Singh come out in full force talking about how he needs to be in power. He was not bothered about the people, he was bothered about the nuclear deal, which shows that we are subservient to the United States of America. That's as simple as that. The truth is, right? So let's not kind of lie to ourselves because we are not really a civilized society, because we're an indifferent society, a society of indifferent people who believe in putting nincompoops on a pedestal. Nincompoops like Sharad Pawar, nincompoops like Vijay Mallya, nincompoops like Mukesh Ambani were all part of fixing deals which actually kind of marginalize and impoverish people in this country even more. We had Ban Ki-moon, the Director General, the Secretary General of the United Nations, who came down around 3 months ago. And along with an actor called Amir Khan, who did something called Satyamev Jayate, which was based on half-truths. and another actor called Shabana Azmi and a cricketer called Sachin Tendulkar. They got the media to write about them, about how they would discuss children's issues. And the children's issues were to be discussed in a building which is built on the graves of children. It's a building called Antila, owned by Mukesh Ambani. And the building is built on the graves of children. I say so because it was a building, the land belonged to an orphanage. So it belonged to Muslim orphans who've been displaced today. And they were discussing children's issues in that building. This is the hypocrisy, this is the kind of mediocrity we live in this country. And we actually consider these people as heroes. The media builds them up as heroes. Sorry to say that. Let me come to another company called Vedanta. Vedanta, which marginalizes people in Odisha and Andhra Pradesh, has damaged the entire document, destroyed it. Is being given the Businessman of the Year award this year by Economic Times. It shows you how awards can be bought. Padma Bhushans can be bought and the Economic Times awards can be bought. This is the era we live in. This is India. Last year, Dr. Manmohan Singh, along with his other stooges like Chidambaram and Montek Singh Ahluwalia, decided that rupees 32 is good enough for a family to survive, to live, to have food, to have shelter, and do everything else. They have not yet seen the sex workers in places like Kamatipura and Sonagachi. And civil society, the so-called, what is that body called? National Advisory Committee, which is full of people from civil society like Aruna Roy and Harsh Mandar, and I worked with some of them opposing the $2 regime, which was promoted by the International Monetary Fund 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Now 32 rupees is much less than $1. I think Montek and Chidambaram can do the math, right? But 32 rupees is good enough for a family to survive, to exist, to live. And nobody opposed it. Nobody in the NEC opposed it. I had to keep speaking about it and keep writing them letters of, what are you doing? Why aren't you opposing this? It was only after 3 weeks that Aruna Roy finally wrote the letter and opposed it. But a whole lot of people were brought above the poverty line because 32 rupees is good enough for people to exist and live. Because we need to spend our money on armament, on nuclear deals, on buying more military weaponry. Because that's where we can make money. That's where we can fix deals. If you go and see the media, if you have Arnab Goswami from Times Now, if you start believing him, you'll think that everybody in Odisha is an Naxalite. And most of Indians believe that the Naxalites are a force which should be dealt with severely. But why does not anybody ask themselves this question? Why does a farmer pick up a gun? Why does a peace-loving farmer pick up a gun? Why are farmers committing suicide when there are irrigation scams happening by the Sharad Pawars and the Ajit Pawars of the world? And nobody's questioning it. I've been speaking about this for years. It's come to the fore now. But yet, all these guys have got more powerful positions. You have the cabinet reshuffle which happened later and nobody's doing anything about it. The media is silent about it. What's happening? I work in so-called civil society, and there was a question which was raised, how can we call society civilized? It's actually a joke. Are we really a civilized society? We are happy being cronies and actually putting people in a pedestal who should be dealt with civilly and thrown behind bars. If you see the recent Hindustan Times Leadership Summit, you will see that most people who are absolute rogues were being glorified as heroes. Inconvenient truth. You know, this is something what Noam Chomsky had said, that if you want to stop terrorism, you need to stop participating in it. Let me come to 26/11. Everybody talks about 9/11, but let me come to 26/11. And I actually don't blame the few people who are in governance or in positions where we elected them to public office, because they're by far a few. I blame the citizenry, whether it's in the United States, the UK, or the India, for being silent, because they say that all it takes for evil to triumph is when good people stay silent. And when 26/11 happened, all the Bombayites, and I've grown up in Bombay, I studied there all my life, everyone came out with their Louis Vuittons and their Gucci bags saying, we need justice, we need good governance. They came out with candle lights and You know, they went to the Taj the Taj Mahal hotel in Bombay with candlelights, but our people had died. Who are our people, I asked them? Our people, because they died in the Taj Mahal hotel, they died in the Opera hotel. What happened all these years? There are people dying in Kashmir, there are people dying in the Northeast, there are people dying in Gujarat. They are not our people? Oh, they don't belong to our class. 3 months later, the Bal Thakres and the Raj Thakres of the world were beating up people from UP and Bihar. Nobody from Bombay came to their rescue. People were being killed in broad daylight. Nobody came to their rescue because they're not our people. They don't belong to our class. Now we live in a world where we are so indifferent. We think of ourselves as civilized, but deep down, we are nothing but rogues. We are only bothered about ourselves. How then can all this injustice and bad governance that is happening in the world end? Because at the end of the day, we are lied to by saying that these are democracies. I shudder to think whether India is a democracy. I feel it's a surrogate monarchy, being passed on from father to son to daughter and God knows what. And if you go to the United States of America, it's very, very clear and stark to see that most votes are fixed. Right from Al Gore and what happened with him to what's happening now. Because it's all about capitalism, it's all about crony capitalism. And that's where the entire business of war comes in. Because war is about capitalism. We remove the war agenda from the United States of America, and what do they have? They have nothing. The economy will collapse even further. Now, I don't need any conspiracy theory to prove that, because people pretty much know it, but nobody wants to say anything about it, because they are the big daddies, right? So, I do hope, because, I want to congratulate Dr. Mehta for writing this book and bringing out a lot of truths, because I believe in most of them. But I'm a little cynical because it was 20 years ago in 1992 that Suzuki Severin, a 12-year-old girl, made a very impassioned plea to all the world leaders who had gathered in the UN World Assembly in Rio de Janeiro at Brazil. And we are in 2012 now, just 20 years later. And the basic message that Suzuki Severin had said is that if you cannot fix it, don't break it. She spoke about war, she spoke about environment, she spoke about poverty. And 20 years later, in 2012, the world is worse off. The world is worse off, but there are winds of change blowing in a lot of places because people power has started emerging. And I hope that emerges even further because we need to stop war and demand for peace. Thank you.
Which is the question-answer session. Before I start the question-answer session, I'm happy to take 3. Our panel is happy to take 3 questions at a time. Yeah. Okay, we'll take 3 at a time, and it's a request to the audience and to the panelists to be brief so that we can take all the audience. We don't want to miss anyone who wants to say something, either a comment or a question. But be brief, and the floor is open now. One here, gentleman there, gentleman there, and there, and there. Okay, so we'll just have 3 first. Gentlemen here. Can you please say your name?
I write on politics, also on philosophy. Now, I congratulate Dr. Mehta for the nice book and also the equivalently nice movie. Copy of the book and the movie to Mr. Obama.
To who?
Mr. Obama, President
Mr.
of
Obama.
India.
Okay.
Also to Al-Zawahiri, the chief of Al-Qaeda, and
Okay.
also to Bashar Assad, the president of Syria.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. That will be done. That's it. That's an easy question.
And Mr. Almeida and Somadas all had also raised, including Mr. Radhakrishnan. Since all of us are here to improve the world,
Yeah.
mainly speaking. So what do you think about this gross national happiness concept that Bhutan has brought? And why can't we take other considerations instead of chasing a materialistic life? India doesn't want to be the superpower of the world. It wants to be the greatest. And greatness meaning not being rich or militarily very powerful. We want a better life.
Thank you. One more.
you are completely silent about one issue, which is hurting the entire world. You are talking about peace, but you are completely silent about radical Islam.
Sure.
It converts the entire population into the military. So without these sophisticated weapons and without the real weapons of mass destruction, you cannot take with them. India is suffering from this problem for last 1300 years, not just. First attack on India was in 712. Then there was regular attacks from Afghanistan for last 1000 years. And it is Afghanistan which has never been controlled by any military power of the world, because their entire population is military.
Thank you. Okay, and the other people, which is a great suggestion, which I will follow it up. There are two questions on the floor. One is the Gross Happiness Project, shall we call it, which is very rightly is passed in the United Nations by Bhutan, and they are following it up for other countries to follow. So, and the other is the radical Islamism, which is compared as that we are living with it for centuries and also is rampant in Afghanistan and other countries. Would you like to start, Professor Radhakrishnan? Two questions. Yeah?
Well, it is a very complex situation, and sometimes historians run away from reality. And who writes history? Only the victors and winners write history. No vanquished nation or society has ever written history. And the kind of truth that you have been referring to with regard to Afghanistan is something that we very cleverly force or tend to put it under the carpet. We gloss over these facts. So I fully agree with your contention that this aspect should have also been discussed. Maybe I hope Mr. Vijay Mehta will do it in the next edition.
Thank you.
Gross national happiness, I think, is one of the greatest concepts we've seen in recent times, personally. I think it's a slight shame that it came out of Bhutan, a wonderful, beautiful place, but not necessarily the world's most high-profile country. GDP, gross domestic product, we hear about an awful lot. We have to ask ourselves the question, is this just codified secular materialism, what we're talking about when we talk about GDP, when we talk about growth? Are we really saying this is something absolutely essential to human happiness, or are we saying that this is just a measure of the amount of plastic, disposable products that China or Vietnam or India indeed can put out in a given year? I think it's high time for a re-examination of neoclassical economics in order to broaden what we're talking about this, because at the moment this cult of GDP is damaging our planet and it's creating conflict. So I think the gross national happiness idea is very important. As regards radical Islam and Islamism, my personal view is that Islamism isn't really a religion, it's a political project. I think there is a strain of thought in parts of the Muslim world whereby there's a lust for power, there's a lust for a giant Islamic superstate to be a superpower in the way that the United States is a superpower, perhaps China and India will be superpowers. And I think that it's not really a religious driving force, but a political one. And the fact that Islamist terrorists have probably killed more Muslims than every other religious denomination put together over the last decade, I think, is evidence for that. It's interesting, I was in Pakistan last August, I was in Lahore and Faisalabad, and speaking to journalist friends of mine who live in absolute terror of the ISI. A friend of mine is living under a death threat because he dared to have his book criticizing the Pakistani military published in India. The intersection of extreme Islamist bellicosity and the reach of the military combined. And I think actually you're quite right, it's probably something that we should have researched more, and that's my failure in the book. And perhaps my only excuse is that there's so much written about it at the moment anyway that I felt we could go in a different direction. But it's a very good point.
Thank you.
Jihad or terrorism or so-called holy crusades were started by Muslims. And they are so wrong, because jihad or the holy crusades were not started by the Muslims, they were started by the Holy Catholic Church, the Vatican City. So that's the first thing which I would like to clarify, so that Islam does not get marginalized. I can say that with a lot of strength because I'm also from the same Catholic community. Whenever we hear of the word terrorism, the first thing that we speak about is Muslims, and I think that's very unfair, because you can't have war on terror, which is kind of the propaganda which India and countries like the US do, war on terror. 3 words which are well sold, and the United States is very good in marketing what they do. But the point is, you can't stop terror or stop terrorism until and unless you address the root causes, which are poverty, marginalization, illiteracy, and a whole lot of other issues. You cannot say that I'm going to do war on terror by killing a few terrorists. You can't kill a few terrorists and expect to stop terror. That's not how it's going to stop. And let's not forget that the United States were the people who actually kind of created the Bin Ladens and the Saddams of the world. That's fact, not fiction anymore. So, speak about Muslims being terrorists, because terrorists have been in all states. The Irish were mostly Catholics and they were terrorists too. So, yeah, that's all I would like to say about that. As far as the gross national happiness is concerned, I think Bhutan is a case study and a brilliant example to follow. But I think it happens because the king is a very supreme human being. Where do you find the king who wants to make his country into a democracy? The only 2 dictatorial things which the king ever did was no tobacco and no television, because he wanted to insulate his people from consumerism and mindless media. So I think if you can follow that example, you could have gross national happiness in India also. Thank you.
The revolution that has swept us, it's amazingly charming and romantic to say we can quantify happiness, sir. But how many of us, if I ask you this question, are happy today, can give a standardized answer to it? So I think quantifying happiness is one of the biggest challenge, and I don't think it should get into the quantitative realm. And we can't quantify it for citizenry, although it's amazingly charming as a concept.
Thank you. I think one of the basic problems is that there are less Islamic fundamentalists and more moderate thinkers, writers, journalists who are Muslims in our country and all around the world. Just it's a question of them standing up and be counted. That's the first reaction I got. And secondly, the greatest example of, shall we say, living together is India. Out of our presidents, 4 presidents have been Muslims. We have the largest Muslim population in the world after Indonesia, and we live with them. And personally, I've flown kite with them. My next door neighbors have been Muslim, and we have actually, if we had a dish, we cooked, we gave it to them, and they cooked a dish, they brought to our house. So we lived very happily. It's a demonization of a community in our heart, and part of the narrative which is in the press and the media. And media is incoherent. Why these leaders do it, that Pakistan is our biggest enemy, and now moreover China, to get votes. And the same narrative is repeated in Pakistan about India. So the more trade, I'm so happy, the more trade we are doing with Muslim countries, the better we are going to cross that hurdle where there will be no more radical Islamism in the future. And I hope that comes very soon.
Good. Sir, how many India, Afghanistan, Egypt?
Absolutely. But that is a great thing our country has.
What is greatness in that?
And there were 3, not 4 presidents.
Is it 3 or 4?
3.
3. So it's a great,
a lot of the figures.
it's great, shows our great generosity that a country with 81% Hindus can have a Muslim president. Look, a great example I'll give you now, when we had the last election. And that is one of the greatest example of what happened. That the UPI won the election, and we had an Italian woman who won it, chose a Sikh prime minister to be a prime minister, and he was inaugurated by a Muslim president. See the diversity in our country? 3 different nationalities came together to run the country. So that is the great country we are living in.
Mr. Mehta, she is not Italian anymore.
She is not Italian, of course. Origin, Italian origin.
Origin doesn't matter. She has spent 25, 30 years.
We are not going to look into the negative things we are talking. Okay, let's have 3 more questions because this could be the last round of questions. So we can have 6 instead of 3. But I say something that 30 seconds for question and a minute for reply. And then we can all go and enjoy the reception.
We ask you, sir, regarding the book, wherein you, Madam, has told us deliberately, you discussed the economic crisis as something that has been brought out by US deliberately. The economics of it, if you can express in detail. And secondly, very briefly, can we have some role nations which are role models, if not US and China, which we can look up to in the real context of things?
Thank you. Dr. Anup. Yes, Anup.
Yeah, I am Anup Swarup, an academic. As I congratulate Vijay Mehta, just 2 very quick comments. One is on the happiness index. I would mention that in the United Nations, after the gross domestic product, it is the human development index, not the happiness index. In fact, happiness index, which was first espoused by the Bhutanese government, is indeed, a survey was done all across the globe, and Indians were found to be the happiest people on this globe. Despite all the deprivation we have. So it's the Human Development Index which is in vogue, and this is now followed by the United Nations also.
Thank you.
Second comment, very quick, it's not we versus them. Because when we're talking about Hindus versus Muslims or Christians versus Muslims, it's not them. It's the cost, when you talk about this book, the cost is not in terms of economies of money alone. It's the human life which is much more important.
Sure.
Just to mention very briefly, in the last 10 years, after September 11, in last 10 years, for every life lost in the New York Twin Tower, lives lost in the fight against terror. And most of these lives are Muslim lives. It is us. It is the humans who are suffering.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Actually, this term, military-industrial complex, one had heard of it in the 70s and 80s, and I'm hearing it today after a long time. So all the best to you for your campaign. I hope you, make a success of it. And in fact, former Prime Minister of England, Anthony Sampson, he'd written a book on the military-industrial complex. And in fact, the movement for peace, the campaign against nuclear disarmament, that was very active some time back. I've not heard of those guys for a long time. I don't know whether they're active or not. They were very active in England. And so, all the best to you with your campaign against the military-industrial complex. Yes, it would be it is creating a big problem in this society. And I also want to congratulate Mr. Almeida for his comments and all the wonderful people in our country, Ambanis, etc., because a similar thought went through my head when I read about Anil Agarwal getting that award from the Economic Times. I mean, I was pretty shocked actually. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Simar Ahluwalia. I'm also writing a book on similar lines, but it's not on military only. It talks about a whole lot of different issues as well. But my question is, when we have like a Mexican standoff sort of a situation where everyone is pointing a gun at the other person, and so how do we effectively move on to disarmament? Who's going to try to think of putting their gun down first? Because as we develop more and more, what happens is our interest to protect our investment increases. So as we move to development, it is in India's interest to sort of safeguard that. While it is a very good argument to sort of move to disarmament, but how do we effectively proceed? Because, I mean, if we try to set out an example, we are effectively, based in such a volatile situation in the, the Asian Peninsula where things can go wrong for the Indian community.
Thank you.
But I also would like to add one thing. I mean, when you spoke about the Indian Prime Minister and the Muslim president and all that, but there's this Japanese concept of tatame and one, there's a facade. I mean, Congress had really marginalized the Sikh community, so they had to put up a facade of a Sikh thing. So it was not out of, like goodness or secularism. I think it was a facade, and I think Jardina would agree with me over there.
I think it's a very...
It's not a question, it's just a mission.
Okay.
In fact, most of us unite for peace and talk for peace and write for peace a lot. But we hardly act for peace. Whether it is on behalf of poor or against the militarization or against armament or whatever it is, against ecological imbalance, we act less and we talk more.
Okay.
And the only single thing that we attach to Radhakrishnan is he acts more.
Okay.
He writes and he speaks, but he acts also. He is Sena, and he encounters violence within a violence team. So, do you have any such agenda on your NGO part to act to encounter all these problems?
Thank you.
This is a mission, not a question.
Thank you.
My name is G.T. Hugai. I had a comment on the US. I completely agree that they are responsible for creating the brutal wars that are going on in so many parts of the world by the intervention. But I think it's very interesting that after 9/11 there has not been a single terrorist attack in the US. The reason, in my opinion, is that the US democracy internally is quite remarkable. The people over there do not discriminate against each other, and there's equality of opportunity and all. This is most unlike India, for instance, where you have a terrorist attack every other day. Secondly, can I be optimistic in saying that the number of wars is going down radically by another country as such? And I think the discoveries of shale gas, for instance, in the US is going to really impinge on their greed to gather resources of gas all over the world. So I think one can be optimistic that in the coming few days there will be many less wars. Lastly, I haven't understood what Mr. Agrita said.
Can you bring the microphone to your mouth?
When he said that in Brazil, I think Mr. Suzuki said that if you can't fix it, don't break it. What exactly does that imply? That the Arab Spring and so many others are very good for the world, that you go on breaking things and they will fix themselves in the course of time. What was the
Thank you. Last.
Bangia, Secretary, Indian Institute of Public Administration, Haryana Regional Branch. I must also congratulate you for the endeavor in which you have brought out the book. My suggestion, or you can say, towards your endeavor is that unless people's cooperation and also a networking of people who really are interested to bring peace in world are brought together, and also to educate the children right from the school age about moral education, we will not be able to achieve our goals. Thank you.
Thank you.
To YouTube and watch the speech. It's called The Girl Who Silenced the World for 5 Minutes. It's a brilliant speech. Please do watch it. Thank you.
Okay, James.
Just a, sorry, can I...
Oh, yes, sure.
Just going to quickly go through the questions as I heard them. As for the 2008 financial crisis being deliberate, reading the first chapter of Vijay's book, I mean, it's worth reading. That's not quite the impression I got. I got the impression that it was more that the US deliberately racked up an enormous deficit and debts with China in order to fund various social programs and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And with very little intention of ever paying China back at face value. And if you look at the quantitative easing program now underway in the United States, that looks like a fairly obvious attempt to debase the value of the US dollar and actually reduce reduce the scope of external US indebtedness. So, but do read the chapter. Mr. Ahluwalia, I think you make very good points about this Mexican standoff, but of course this is the concept of military balance, which Vijay discusses in his book. It's this quite formal military theoretical concept whereby you have different countries balancing each other with their arsenals. And this is used and played by international arms companies in order to arm some countries, in order to persuade their neighbours to actually purchase even more sophisticated weaponry. And I don't think it can really be viewed as a coincidence that Pakistan and Israel and Egypt and these countries which are not popular within their neighbourhoods receive so much US military aid. So it's their responsibility. But I think we can certainly see patterns behaviour from Western powers that are actually accelerating conflicts. And just very finally, this idea that the number of wars is decreasing, you can debate it, but what's absolutely certain is that the number of countries with nuclear weapons is increasing, and it's going to continue increasing. And what we have is an overhang of nuclear violence that is unimaginable. And unimaginable. But I will leave it there.
I'm going to skip the temptation of answering all these questions because we'll be here another half an hour. All I'm going to do is thank everyone for the... Thanks first of all to the distinguished panelists, Radhakrishnan, James, Soma and Jerry, and also all of you in the audience, for distinguished audience for your contributions, and the question answer session. Please give all of them a hand of applause. Thanks to my son Sanjay and the hospitality out of this world they are giving us while we are in Delhi. Please give them a hand. The peoples whose efforts have made this event a success. Please give them a round of applause. A word to the audience. If you have been inspired this evening, because I can find there's a lot of energy floating in the room at the moment. Trap it. Trap the energy into action. Because, why? Because all us, ordinary human beings, have got the extraordinary power to change the world. So, let's start doing it right from now. Demilitarizing the world, abolishing the war and the violence, and work for a safer future for us and for the coming generations. I'm tempted, a couple of more minutes to give you a couple of, or 2 or 3 quotes, which should give you energy when you are on the road or in the reception. So these are 3 quotations I'm going to tell you. One is from Margaret Mead, and she says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." 2 all-time favorite is from His Holiness Dalai Lama, and it goes like this: "If you think you are too small to change the world, try sleeping with a mosquito." Professor Radhakrishnan, go on. Okay, James Brazier. Okay, Soma.
Thank you, sir.
And lastly to Jerry. Thank you very much.